Okay, so let's start with framing. So framing is the observation that in real life, people often make a different choice depending on how a decision is presented or interpreted, even if sort of the underlying choice is exactly the same. Okay, and this type of, you know, this type of a situation when somebody is doing that, that's known as a framing effect. Okay, so so suppose, for example, okay, that you lead a team of scientists developing, I should update this slide. I said developing the annual flu vaccine, but let's say you're developing the coronavirus vaccine. Okay. And you're told that two vaccines could possibly be developed. The first works on any strain of flu or coronavirus, I should say, and it's effective 1/3 of the time. So out of 3,000 infected patients, in other words, 1,000 will survive. Okay. Um, the second it works nearly 100% of the time, but only with one particular type of coronavirus. Okay, one particular strain of the coronavirus. And so there is a 1 in 3 chance that all 3,000 patients will survive, if they're all infected with that strain of the coronavirus that it's effective on. But there's a 2 in 3 chance that none will survive. Okay. So either 3,000 patients, 1,000 are guaranteed to survive. Okay. Or you have this sort of, it's more of a gamble. All 3,000 patients will live versus a 2/3 chance that all of the patients will die. Okay, now don't, so for now, just think about it. Okay, if you were a doctor, which of these would you choose? Yeah. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to reframe that choice, except I'm going to focus on the potential loss rather than the potential gain. Okay, so it's going to be the exact same choice. I'm just going to express it a little bit differently. Okay, so um, for the first vaccine, I'm going to say that for this vaccine, 2,000 patients will die for sure. And for the second vaccine, I'm going to say that there is a 1 in 3 chance that no one will die. Okay. So which one would you choose? And so if you're like 75% of people, okay, so, when this study was done, they interviewed a large group of people, and they found that in frame one, okay, that is to say when the choice is presented as it was in the first example, that 75% of the people choose the first vaccine. Okay, sorry, this shouldn't say frame one. This should say choose the first vaccine. Okay, and in frame two, roughly 75% of the people choose the second vaccine. Okay, so in other words, what they found was that changing the way that the question was presented caused more than half of the people to switch between two alternatives that are mathematically identical. Okay, so let me give you guys a second example. Okay, um, a study was conducted on some economists attending a conference. Okay, and half of these economists received an email stating that the conference costs $100, but that they would receive a $30 discount on the registration fee if they applied before a certain date. The other half got an email stating that the conference cost $70, but that there would be a penalty of $30 for the late registration if they waited past that same date. Okay, now what do you guys think happened? I'm sure a lot of you guys can probably guess. Okay, um, the when economists were presented with this second choice, okay, that sort of framed the penalty that frame this extra $30 in the form of a fee, a late fee, a much smaller percentage of them miss the deadline. Okay, so this sort of viewing it as a penalty or a fee was much more effective in getting people to register early, even though either case you would be losing $30. Okay, so one final example. Okay, so participants in a study, okay, tried identical samples of hamburger meat. Okay, and in one group, the label on the meat advertised that the meat was 90% lean, and on the other, they advertised the fact that it was 10% fat. Okay, and what they found was that so if you say 10% fat, that emphasizes the fat component of the meat, so people think it's less healthy. Okay, so the people in that group, after sampling the meat, they ended up saying that they were less likely to buy the meat, but also they reported enjoying the meat more as compared to the people who got the 90% lean. Again, in either case, they tried exactly the same meat. Okay, so what's the lesson to be learned from all of this stuff? Okay, obviously it's this idea that how you present the question matters, but there's also sort of a more nuanced point, okay, which is that if you think about it, in all three of these examples, they involve describing the situation either in terms of potential losses or potential gains. And what's been found is that in general, people are more motivated to avoid loss than they are to seek gain. And so framing a choice by describing the potential loss in a given scenario is usually going to motivate more people. You'll see that, in the case of the virus, in the case of the conference where it could be viewed as a late fee, okay, and also in the case of this hamburger meat where, people are avoiding this 10% fat because they think of that as the unhealthy choice. Okay, in each one of those situations, the situation where people are trying to avoid some sort of loss, okay, is the one that is prevailing. Okay. Okay, so sort of a quick introduction to framing. Okay. Now, I do want to say that there is a bit of an exception for this. Okay. You can't sort of take this too literally. Okay. And this is actually something that comes up a lot when you're teaching. Okay. So the potential for loss motivates people only if there is a direct and relatively short-term relationship between the decision and the negative consequences. Okay. If the negative consequences are far in the future, or if there's like potentially a lot of other confounding influences, then emphasizing negative outcomes doesn't really help motivate people all that much. In fact, it often just sort of demotivates them. Okay. So like, for example, if I wanted you to study harder, my strategy wouldn't necessarily be to emphasize, oh, well, if you don't study hard, you're going to fail. And then, I don't know, you're not going to find a job or something like that. I mean, that may be true to some extent. Okay. But, framing in that way, it really doesn't motivate people most of the time. If I wanted you to study harder, I would instead, I would try to reward you for doing so, and I would try to emphasize those rewards. Okay, so there are some exceptions to this rule. Okay, all right. Actually, I think that's a good stopping point. I'll see you guys in the next video.